mass shooting. It's been 4 days and counting, and the police have not been able to arrest nor apprehend the individual who's responsible for this tragic incident. I found a video that's recorded by the Professor of Black Truth. Check it out, ladies and gentlemen.
Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the moment of truth. Yes, it has happened again.
We begin with the hunt for the gunman in the deadly shooting at Brown University.
Providence, Rhode Island is on edge tonight with that gunman still on the loose. We interrupt the last school shooting to tell you about the latest school shooting. On Saturday, there was yet another mass shooting at a school, this time at Brown University. First Charlie Kirk and now this. 30% of the population, but 99% of the school shooters. The casualties this time around, 2 students dead, 9 others injured. As of Monday night, one of the injured was in critical but stable condition at a hospital. 7 were hospitalized, but in stable condition, 1 had been released. Now, the question, of course, is who did it? The usual suspect. So far, the flatfoots out there have had no less than 2 so-called persons of interest who they went after, and then promptly let both of them go. That's how you know that these guys don't have a clue. They don't know whether to wind their watch or go blind. And Kash Patel's FBI, which I think stands for feeble-brained idiots, has put out this very detailed image of their latest person of interest. I guess they figure third time must be the charm.
Like today, the police put out this new video of the man they're still looking for, and the FBI posted a $50,000 reward for information leading to his arrest.
Tonight, new surveillance video shows what Providence police are calling a person of interest in the weekend's deadly shooting. Images of a man wearing a hat, much of his face covered by a mask, captured just a few blocks from the Brown University building where a gunman entered a lecture hall on Saturday and opened fire.
At this point, this is so rote, so routine that even the left corner of the white media can't really get that outraged about this latest atrocity, precisely because of the fact that it happens so much. And there's a lot of people who are understandably frustrated at best and infuriated at worst that the thugs in blue are showing that basically all they're good for is gunning down unarmed black people. When it comes time to actually do a competent investigation, they just can't. 2 so-called persons of interest in a row that they nabbed, and then immediately had to let both of them go. You know, with racial immunity from law being the norm for certain segments of the society, this catch and release program is pretty normal. But what's keeping the good folks in Providence awake at night is that the killer is still on the loose. And the longer he remains at large, the smaller the chances are that the local flatfoots will actually catch him. Now, one of the things that people should be asking is what went wrong with security at the school? Why is it that whenever these school shooters show up, whoever's supposed to be doing security for these places usually runs and hides? I always thought the entire point of campus security was, security. But what happens is these guys are usually a bunch of wannabe cops themselves. And as we've seen with other incidents where university police have harassed or even killed black citizens, these guys only seem to be tough whenever they're dealing with a black person who's unarmed. The rest of the time, they're typical cowards. Just like the badge-toting punks they like to cosplay as. And speaking of the badge-toting punks, there should already be individuals who have been suspended or otherwise forced to resign at this point. How the hell do you have at least 2 different persons of interest who you bring in, and then you gotta let both of them go? What that means is they're just shooting in the dark. They don't really actually know who did it, other than it's probably a white male, just like all these other school shootings. That's basically the only thing that they know. And if that's all they know, they don't know anything. And they're appealing to the public for clues, appealing to the public for any leads, because that's what happens when you're supposed to be the premier law enforcement agency in the U.S., the FBI, or you're supposed to be some sort of law enforcement professionals like the Providence Police Department. Whenever something like this happens, you ask the public who wasn't there, doesn't have any information, but you're hoping against hope that they can go ahead and crack the case for you because you're too incompetent to do it yourself. And I don't know how much in tax dollars the people of Providence pay for their local thugs in blue, but at this point, they should be asking for their money back because this is what has gotten them. You got this mass murder that takes place there. They should have already had this clown caught from the very beginning, but of course they never do, because all they're thinking about is trying to find ways to demand more money from the city for their pay, trying to find a way to get less hours. These guys are not in the business of public safety. They're in the business of harming black people, and this is the result. When you actually need to have competent retroactive investigations, you can't get them because these guys are not in that business. At this point, these psychos from the suburbs, they can absolutely count on the predictable incompetence of the thugs in blue. That helps to embolden these killers. They already know from the jump that basically, if they can get away from the scene of the crime, hell, practically halfway home free. 2 students dead and 9 others injured. That's the cost of the police's incompetence. And just for those of you who are keeping score at home, this same weekend that killing was taking place, in the city of Chicago, 1 person was killed and 9 hurt over the same weekend. That was the casualties for the entire weekend in the 2.7 million resident city of Chicago. More people were killed and injured during that few minutes long shooting rampage in Providence than were hurt and killed during the entire weekend in the city of Chicago. And that matters because the same low IQ crowd who tries to pull out the old per capita card or tries to bring up the proverbial south side of Chicago, it's important to bring this up when something like this happens. It's important to remind people of the facts so you can push back against the white right's predictable racial fragility. Now, of course, the white media, without even knowing who the mass shooter is, they're basically prepping the ground at this point already for the predictable defense of, well, this guy, I'm sure that he was loved and beloved by everyone who knew him. That's what they were saying when they had the second person of interest in custody. They were already prepared to tell people, well, he's a military veteran, he was in the military. They might as well have had the stars and stripes forever playing in the background. There's been the usual what's his motivation crap, and this is the white media trying to keep up appearances by pretending that whenever someone from the dominant society goes on one of these rampages, well, that's not normal, when the reality is this happens literally every other day. School shootings by people like this are the norm because it's allowed to be. But what isn't normal is for the white media to take these school shootings and racially pathologize them, the way that they do whenever they see black people who have been accused of a crime, whenever they see an opportunity to put up a story that basically racially profiles an all but name. Oh, they love to racially pathologize as long as it's black people that they can go ahead and point at. But when they don't have black people to point the dirty end of the stick at, suddenly they decide to forget about their racial pathology narrative. No matter how much a particular incident is repeated, no matter how much a particular profile is repeated, oh no, we can't do that. Let the bodies drop. That's the white media's mentality. Out of sight, out of mind, and hopefully not talked about. This isn't about saving lives. For them, it's about saving face. And people can be angry that this keeps happening all they want, but the reality is America doesn't have a gun control problem. What America has is a racial privilege problem. That's the dirty little secret that nobody wants to talk about. That's the reason why these killers seem able to just go ahead and go wherever they want to, and they never seem to encounter any sort of resistance. Doesn't matter if it was the guy who killed Charlie Kirk, or the guy who took a pot shot at President Trump, or the mass shooting at Brown University. It always fits the exact MO. Not just by the shooter, but also by the white powers that be. The real problem here aren't the mass shootings themselves. It's that this is a societal norm and you're not even allowed to say it. Well, I'll certainly say it. For the individuals that you see in the white right media and elsewhere who try to racially pathologize black people when it comes to criminality, they need to look at their own house and clean that place up. How is it that the people in the society who have the most money, who get the most attention and ego stroking from the white media, who have the most comfort and yet have the least restraint, how does that keep happening over and over again? Until this society decides it has finally developed enough moral courage to confront that question and to answer it decisively, then these killings are going to continue because the people who would bring them to an end aren't in a position of power to do so. And that's also by design. This is what happens when an entrenched system is allowed to embed itself in the society. It gets to the point that you can't move it. It's intractable. There's nothing you can do about it. There's also nothing you can do with it. And that's the reason why in America's schools, there's been a course that every student from elementary all the way up to university level has had to learn. And that is shelter in place. There's no textbooks for this course and there's no study guide either. But the passing grade is survival. Maybe. Good day and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our...
And ladies and gentlemen, that is a stipulated fact. And I'll go on record and say this. It shouldn't take 4+ days to find one white man, overweight, in ski mask, who committed these crimes. If there had been a black man, the entire police force with all the neighboring police would have been there, and they all would have had him arrested within 5 minutes. You know it, and I know it. Never surrender. Never quit.